Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Eric Altman, sales engineer at Vodia Networks. And today we'll also be joined by Paul Tuttle from Cyberdata as we talk about Vodia and Cyberdata and their connection with Microsoft Teams. First of all, a little bit about Vodia. Vodia PBX has been around since 2005. Our focus is on cloud PBX. We offer true multi-tenancy where all your customers can be managed on a single instance of the PBX. Our platform is 100% developed in-house, built on a model that fosters interoperability. And currently we're based in Burlington, Massachusetts, about 15 miles west of Boston. So why this integration makes sense. Microsoft Teams is now a landmark business platform. Microsoft's pushing it, and it's not going away anytime soon. With Teams reaching over 13 million users daily, it's important that to those users that require voice, that they have all the features of a PBX. With the Teams phone system, certain aspects are not really covered well. Interoperability with standard VoIP phones, termination with SIP trunks, integration with devices like the ones that Cyberdata will be talking about today. Direct routing in Teams opens up the possibility for integration, and Vodia and Cyberdata are very well positioned for this. Now, Vodia's built-in SBC or session border controller can terminate internal and external calls, giving Vodia extensions and MS Teams extensions the ability to seamlessly communicate with each other. Teams members can belong to hunt groups, agent groups, and conferences. And employees who have no need to take advantage of utilizing Teams can still have a registered SIP phone, making it possible for them to still be called from or to make calls to an MS Teams extension through direct routing. The session border controller that's built into the PBX is a key element for this Teams integration. It's an integral part of the PBX that's been supporting TLS and WebRTC ICE for a long time now. And bottom line, the SBC handles the interaction with Teams. How it does this is by allowing different parts of the network to communicate using a variety of techniques like NAT traversal, far end and near end, SIP normalization via SIP message and header manipulation, IPv4 to IPv6 interworking, DTMF relay and interworking, media transcoding, tones and announcements, and data and fax interworking. And when we talk about assigning DIDs, that's done the same way in the PBX, whether there are team members or not. And if there are any other devices registered to that extension, they'll ring at the same time on an incoming call. This works for both direct calls to the extension, as well as calls coming from hunt groups and ACD groups. And another significant benefit to this integration is the cost savings that can be incurred by having a multitude of SIP trunk providers to choose from, allowing customers to choose their preferred provider rather than being limited to selecting one from a short list. So here are the requirements to set up the integration. You would have a Microsoft Teams or Office 365 account. That account would be under a fully qualified domain, FQDN. The Teams users need to have at least an E3 or E5 Microsoft license or a license that supports direct routing. On the Vodia side, you would need a collaboration license. You would also have a domain which is fully qualified in the Vodia PBX with a valid certificate. And you would build a Teams trunk in the PBX to connect to Microsoft Teams. Some requirements for the server that the PBX runs on. We're operating system independent, supporting Windows as well as Linux, CentOS, Debian, Ubuntu. The server can be virtualized and should be dual core, built with 4 to 8 gigs of RAM, and 80 to 100 megs of hard drive space. It should be on a public IP or in the DMZ. As far as the certificate, you can use either of the root CAs that Microsoft mentions, or we found that the free Let's Encrypt certificate works as well. So here are a couple of pertinent scenarios. In the case of a school employees can have Microsoft Teams collaboration. The classrooms can be on regular VoIP phones. The teachers could be on the apps or even their cell phones without the app. Teams users can do live and recorded overhead paging. Things like emergency call notifications can be done through Cyberdata devices or text or email. The PBX can also operate the school bell. And on outbound calls made through the app, teachers can use the caller ID of the school rather than their own. All outbound termination of calls is done through SIP trunks on the PBX. In the case of, let's say, a hotel, Teams can be really powerful for the back office. The PBX can address other hotel requirements like wake-up calls and maid services. The hotel rooms can use hotel VoIP phones or analog adapters if they prefer, rather than VoIP phones. The hotel employees can use multi-cell DECT phones or the mobile or desktop app. Public area phones can be placed throughout the hotel, as well as Cyberdata overhead paging devices. The PBX can integrate with the hotel's property management system using a couple of different protocols that we support. And the PBX can also provide room location for any calls made to 911 if needed. This scenario would also be consistent with nursing homes requirements or even campgrounds. When we talk about logistics and transportation, typically transportation companies will have office staff where Cyberdata access control and overhead paging can be used. And they're going to have people on the road. The office staff and the road warriors can communicate seamlessly with each other with the Vodia Teams integration. The truck driver does not need a Teams license. As I've mentioned, Teams and non-Teams members being able to communicate with each other seamlessly is a key takeaway here. I mean, that's basically how we're communicating with the Cyberdata devices. They're not Teams members as well. And because of that, it's not even necessary to share private phone numbers for that truck driver, or for example, an airline could avoid international cell phone costs by terminating traffic through the Vodia mobile apps. Okay, let's talk a little bit about provisioning. We support LAN provisioning for premises for a lot of phone models and devices. When the phone or device fresh out of the box is connected to the network, the phone system detects it and shows it in a list of LAN devices. You simply select the domain and extension to which you want to provision the phone or Cyberdata device and press setup. This also ties the device to that extension by setting its MAC to that extension, and also opens that extension for a window of time, say 30 minutes, in which first provisioning can be done without authentication. Microsoft Teams with phone system connects to the Vodia SBC, which is built into the Vodia PBX. Vodia connects by creating an MS Teams trunk. And the Vodia PBX creates a dial plan for the SIP trunk so that team members can make outbound calls. A Teams user can receive inbound calls as well as be part of a hunt group or agent group. There's a wide range of SIP trunk providers that can be used with Vodia, as you can see some of them here. You can have multiple SIP trunks as well for least cost routing and failover capabilities. You can also set time of day routing, and PSTN gateways are supported and can be used for termination as well. And here's a visual of the LAN provisioning. You can see the list of devices that were detected over here on the screen, right there. You simply hit that setup button right there next to the phone that you want provisioned. Let's talk a little bit about the requirements and what actually gets provisioned. First, the phone or Cyberdata unit needs to be factory reset. When deploying the Vodia PBX, it makes sense to have one routable public IP address for the PBX if it's a cloud deployment. That's not necessary if it's on premises. Also, for a Vodia cloud deployment, it's important to have an FQDN, a fully qualified domain name, that your phones can register to. For premises deployment, you want to use a domain name instead of an IP address. The setting found in the Vodia PBX helps so that only requests to the domain name are answered. Settings profiles for the extension are sent to the phone when it's provisioning to the Vodia PBX. A few of the many items provisioned to the phone include the account number, username, buttons configuration, company logo, time zone, and ringtones. Phone provisioning history. When a phone provisions to the Vodia PBX, we create a config file, a CFG file, for the phone, which is shown to the administrator. Here, the administrator can review what values were sent to the phone. You can also re-provision the phone by clicking on the re-provision button when you've changed a setting for the extension, including buttons or name change, etc. The Vodia PBX keeps an audit of the phone's registration history, as well as functionality to reboot or resync the phone when you've made a change to the extension and you want the phone to have those new values. Admin history shows what has been changed on the extension. For example, opening for plug and play or changing a password. So you can see anything that's done on the system in the admin history. When you do provision a phone or Cyberdata device, Vodia automatically assigns a web and PIN password to the device. It's important to set these parameters under the domain settings. Once you've entered your admin, PIN, and password, Vodia will provision these values into the device so that you can then log into it if need be. And lastly, an overview of the Microsoft Teams integration. You've got easy integration with Vodia, can auto-generate the Let's Encrypt certificates. You have the ability to host multiple Microsoft Teams domains. So in a multi-tenant environment, you can have multiple customers using Teams. We're offering traditional PBX features, offering voice routes to different SIP trunk providers. Vodia has the built-in session border controller, SBC. Teams members can have a DID on the PBX, same way anybody else can. You can receive and make calls from Teams to Vodia. You can use the existing IP phone with Vodia to make calls to Teams members. Vodia Conference can be used by team members as well. And Teams members can mix and match between using their Teams communicator, Vodia apps, the WebRTC portal, and desktop phones. If you have a support inquiry, send that request to support@vodia.com. You can also open tickets at vodia.zamad.com. Our documentation, online searchable documentation, is doc.vodia.com/software. We'll get you where you can actually download the software for the PBX. For anything sales related, just contact us at sales@vodia.com. And that's what I got for you guys today on the Vodia side. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul now, who's going to take us through and talk about the Cyberdata different devices that can be used with Vodia and with Vodia on an integration with Microsoft Teams. I'm going.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for the segue there, Eric. Let's go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. Come on, allow. Here we go. Perfect. Okay, we should be sharing my screen here. Eric, just a confirmation everybody can see?
You're sharing the window of Demio.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Firefox. Uh-oh. Let's try that again here. Don't you just love these live presentations? Let's try entire screen. Here we go.
There. Turn on his mic. Oh, there we go. All right.
Okay, think we got it now, right? Jared, Eric, just a confirmation we got this showing here. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Do appreciate your understanding with that little bit of technical issues here to get started. But here at Cyberdata, we make a whole bunch of different IP endpoints. We kind of name ourselves the IP endpoint company. And today we'll be going over a couple different products that we have with Cyberdata. Both our IP to analog category, our access control centric products, and then finally our IP paging products. So we've got a whole bunch of different products that are useful for different categories. Of course, like I mentioned, we've got intercoms for access control. And we'll be focusing on 2 products out of that particular category, although I think we make more intercoms than just about anybody out there. We've got 2 ones that we'll focus on today. Our SIP outdoor intercom, that's part number 011186, and our SIP outdoor intercom with keypad, that's part number 011214. For our IP to analog overhead paging products, we've got the SIP paging adapter, part number 011233, and part number 011146 for our SIP paging server. And finally, for our IP paging centric products, we've got both the SIP speaker, part number 011394, and our SIP IP66 horn, part number 011457. So, to talk a little bit more about intercoms, why are intercoms useful for access control? For one, they're a really easy integration with Vodia and Teams. Like with what Eric went over for the entire Vodia system and the integration with Teams, it's really easy to set up. I've gone through a lot of the process as we were setting up the documentation and working on the interoperability process with it. And it's a really easy system to set up as compared to some of the other, say, hardware-based SBCs that you'll run into. Very, very easy and seamless to integrate. And one nice thing about intercoms, when you're working with intercoms, you get full duplex communication. Jared, Eric, I do think one of your mics is on. You get full duplex communication when you're working with intercom. So in all of our daily lives now, when we're dealing with COVID and the current pandemic, full duplex communication with being able to isolate and being able to provide that social distancing is just so important now, and intercoms can really provide that kind of feature. You can also control your door with DTMF. So after that intercom is used to initiate a call to a ring group or a direct extension, even a DID, after you communicate with the user there and you want to grant them access, you can enter a DTMF code to trigger the onboard relay of the intercom to be able to get access to that particular facility. So it's really easy for access control that could be handled by, say, a secretary or a security guard at that particular location. So that way they can just facilitate opening the door without having to get up from their desk. So it makes it a really easy, seamless way to be able to provide that access control. And they're really ideal for front doors or even gates, or basically any place that you would want to be able to control that access and be able to confirm who's going to be using that particular entranceway. So some of the intercom features that we have are, of course, an onboard relay that's a normally open, temporarily closed style relay to be able to interface with most door strikes and gate controllers that you'll run into. We've got really simple options where you can basically just press one of the front call buttons right there on, say, the single button that we have pictured on the lower portion of the image there, or the keypad option. You just press the call button and it calls that predetermined number. If you want to go for a little bit more complicated scenario, you can use one of our keypads, and with the additional buttons, you get additional features. Things like actually being able to dial a number. So you can have, say, a directory of numbers in a multi-tenant facility. We've got a speed dial option, so that way you can just press keys 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth to dial predetermined numbers. Makes it really great for, say, multi-tenant office buildings. Say if you've got, a facility that's shared between a couple different doctors' offices, maybe some law offices or some small businesses. Very, very useful for those types of scenarios. We've also got one feature on our keypad intercoms that we call security mode that's really useful for bigger deployments where the entranceway would be used by not only patrons or clients, but also be used by employees. So that way employees can enter their own key code to be able to get access without having to press that front call button. And then your regular patrons or clients can press that call button to go through the standard process of using the intercom, talk to security or whoever the intercom calls, and to be able to communicate with them. And then assuming they're allowed to, the user on the phone side can enter that DTMF code to gain access to the facility. All of our outdoor rated intercom units are IP65 rated, so they're suitable for just about any environment. Whether they're going to be kind of in a windy environment or an area that might get wet, they're totally fine out there, or even say out here in the desert where I am out in Reno, Nevada, they're suitable for just about any environment, any heat temperatures. We've got even some of these things up in the far north of Canada where they get real cold. So these things are suitable for just about any environment thanks to that IP65 rating. For connecting intercoms, we've got, like I said, the onboard relay on there that would be particularly pins 3 and 4. That's our normally open, temporarily closed style relay. And this is just a great diagram that kind of illustrates how that connection would go. Pins 3 and 4 would be connected in line with that power source for that particular door strike or gate controller that you're using, assuming that it's up to 1 amp at 30 volt DC, and that's where that actual door strike connection would go. If you like, and you're using something like a magnetic door sense, you can connect that to pins 5 and 6 on the screw down terminal of the intercom, and that way you could know when the door is actually closed. So if somebody does get access to the facility but doesn't close the door, or they stick a rock in the door jamb because they're going to come back a little later and take some equipment out of that facility, the intercom can take an action and call a number and let them know that a door is ajar. This is just a great example of a use case. We've got a couple other different accessory products for dealing with, say, higher power locks or mag locks, but we won't be getting into that today. We've got more resources available at cyberdata.net if you want to get into those kind of specifics, or you can always reach out to any of us. So for IP to analog for overhead paging, which is a really great option when people are going to be using overhead paging, you've really got a big decision to make whether you want to use your existing analog system or if you want to integrate a full IP-based system. And we really try to offer both options because it can be more cost competitive to go for an IP to analog solution and extend that lifespan of an analog paging system as compared to converting directly to an IP-based system. IP-based is much easier to manage, but can be a little bit pricier to start. So we've got two main products that'll fit into this category. We've got our SIP paging adapter, which would be the lower unit pictured here. They're both the exact same hardware, but different software. But the SIP paging adapter is kind of your basic option if you just want to handle overhead paging for a single zone or a couple zones where you just want to pick up a phone and make an overhead announcement. If that's all the end customer is looking to do, the SIP paging adapter is the perfect unit for that. But we've also got the SIP paging server that can do that same functionality, of course, because it's the same hardware, but it's got a little bit different functionality built into it, where that one is known as kind of a SIP to multicast out style device, where it can receive that SIP call and still, of course, play it through its analog connections, but then also send it back across the network as multicast. So that way it can get picked up by all those fancy IP-based paging products, say that IP66 horn or your multicast speakers that you have throughout your facility, and be able to page to them simultaneously. It's also got great features built into it, like stored message playback, 100 different multicast groups, and a bell scheduler all in one box that you get for just buying the unit. So it's a really, really powerful unit and can be great for school paging, warehouse paging, factory paging, with all those additional features in there. For the two different analog connection types that we have on there, we've got a tip and ring style interface that's a 600 ohm balance style connection. That's kind of for your older amplifier style connections that you'll be working with, say your Bogan, your Valcom, some of the older stuff that you'll run into, although you'll still run into those connection types today. You can still buy amplifiers today that are using that standard tip and ring style connection. Then we've got a more modern 10,000 ohm unbalanced RCA style connection. So if you're dealing with a little bit more modern amplifiers, you can use that standard RCA connection. But with those two different connection types, the 600 ohm tip and ring and the 10,000 ohm RCA style connection, it's really easy to work with, and you can connect to just about anything out there. As long as you're not dealing with, say, an FXS or an FXO port, you can connect to just about anything with these two hardware boxes. So why would you want to do this? Of course, you know, when a lot of, say, schools or factory warehouses go and implement an analog paging system, even say in the last 10, 15 years, that's a pretty solid investment. And the nice thing about all of that analog hardware is that stuff will really kind of function until you actually get damage to the speakers themselves. That copper wire is going to keep working for years, as are those speakers, as long as you don't get any major damage to them. So you can really extend the lifespan of that paging system and that investment that you already made. Like I said initially, it's much, much more economical as compared to going for a full IP-based solution. When you're going for an IP-based solution, it's very, very powerful, but it can be a little pricey to get started. And one nice thing about going for analog over IP is it's just quick and easy to implement. Instead of having to set up a whole bunch of speakers or a whole bunch of horns or a combination of things, you got to set up one device and you're pretty much ready to go. And with the provisioning that's built into Vodia, it makes it so seamless and easy to go and implement one of these products for the system. It's really, really easy to work with. The hardest part can be just plugging it into the network and just wiring that small little connection. Overall, it's pretty easy to work with. So for a kind of standard use case for using one of our SIP paging adapters, you would, of course, have your Vodia unit on the network. In our diagram here, we've got our little IOP box, which is a super awesome little product that you can get from Vodia. But it would basically connect to the network as would your SIP paging adapter. And then with the connection that you can see down here on the bottom of the screen here, you can either connect with that RCA line out connection, just your nice standard big RCA port, or you can use the green interface, what we kind of call the page port connection, for that connection to your amplifier. So you can connect to either one of the amplifiers in either scenario, again, using that 600 ohm balance connection if you're going to be using that tip and ring connection through the green interface, or just your standard unbalanced RCA style connection. So it gives you a lot of easy capability to connect to it, and then you can go and page to your analog system. So this is kind of a standard use case that we'll run into with one of our paging adapters. When you're using a paging server, it's going to be a very similar style connection. Of course, you can use the analog connections that we saw in the last slide to be able to connect to your different amplifiers. But since it's a SIP2 multicast out style device, when it receives that SIP call from, say, Teams or a dedicated phone, it can then convert that into multicast and send the multicast back across the network to all of those fancy IP-based devices that could be picking that up. That could be our standard talkback speaker or a regular SIP speaker, your IP66 horn, or even a strobe if you want some visual notification in places that require that. And one nice thing for both the SIP paging adapter and the SIP paging server is it does have a line in port. So that way you can feed in any background music or any background audio that you would want to be able to play. And the nice thing with that SIP paging server is that background music can not only be sent back out the analog out connections, but it can also be sent back across the network as multicast. So that way all those fancy IP devices can still pick up and play that background music. So with one of these units, you can really control your entire paging system in of course, regular use for emergency notification, but also for that background music. So when we get to IP paging, some great reasons to use IP paging is it's future-proof. It really gives you a lot of capability to look towards the future as you go and implement new things and you expand your system. When you're dealing with an IP-based system, you're kind of restricted to what that amp is capable of, and then you have to deal with getting new amps that'll meet and match the existing speakers you have. When you've got IP-based products, everything's going to work, and it'll be kind of future-proof as you move through different phone systems systems. If you do, you probably won't after you get with Vodia because it's such a great system, but you've got that capability if you need to. And the one nice thing with IP-based paging is you get support for multiple different communication protocols. You get SIP and multicast support. So they can receive a direct SIP call and be able to have, if supporting a full duplex conversation, of course, if that's possible, but it can also support multicast for that wide area of paging. Since they're all IP-based products, they sit on the network and they're easy for remote management and configuration. So if something goes wrong with the speaker, or if you need to go and adjust the volume, it can be done remotely and you don't have to send a tech out to that particular location like you would with, say, an analog system. If an analog speaker goes out, you got to get boots on the ground to deal with that. But if something goes a little haywire with one of your IP-based devices, they can handle that through the network just by remoting in. So it's really, really useful and versatile. And the last thing with IP-based paging is they're versatile for just about any environment and notification protocol. So that way you can just throw them in there and they're really versatile and they can work in a lot of different environments. Say if you're doing mainly SIP-based paging or multicast-based paging, they can work and function in just about any environment. So for main features that you get with IP paging, like I said, you get support for both SIP and multicast, but all of our SIP-based products have two different extensions. We've got one for voice paging that we call our primary SIP extension, and then a second one that we call our night ringer extension. Your night ringer extension is essentially a ringing extension that you can add to different ring groups or call queues for that additional auditory notification of when that call is coming in. So not only the speaker can be used to make those voice announcements, but it can also be used as just an additional ringer for those ring groups or call queues. If a call comes into a sales line or a support line, you get that added notification. So if people are away from their desk and they might not be able to hear it, they can still hear one of these speakers or one of these horns going off and ringing. So it provides a great deal of functionality just with that. When dealing with multicast, we've got 10 different priority-based multicast paging zones from 0 through 9. 0 is, of course, kind of designated for your background music and will be superseded by everything. And then our priority 9 is going to be your highest priority, kind of treated for emergencies. So you've got a lot of capability with both that SIP and multicast, and you can do both of those simultaneously. So you get a lot of features out of these things, as well as some accessory support depending on the products that you're working with. Like I said, the speakers have a lot of different accessories. Like we have pictured here, you can get a clock kit option as well as a strobe kit option. So that way you can tie in both the auditory notification and that visual notification, which is just so useful for kind of loud areas or common areas where people might get a little rowdy, especially in auditoriums, schools, or cafeterias where kids might get a little loud. If they got that nice blinky light on the wall, they'll be able to pay attention and be able to hear that emergency notification. And then you get network-based volume control. So that way, if you're dealing with kind of that louder environment, you want to be able to get in there and adjust the volume, you can do that. But also, since they've got the capability for that network volume control, if you get one of those pesky teenagers that sees that there's a nice little volume scrolly wheel on the speaker, haha, I'm going to play a joke and turn down the volume of the speaker, they can't do that because you've set it up for network volume control. So you get a lot of capability out of one of these units. And at the end of the day, these things are pretty loud, which is also just a great feature of your paging system. If you're going to go and invest all this money into a paging system, you want to be able to hear it. And with our products, you definitely can. So to talk a little bit more about an all-encompassing use case that would show a whole bunch of our different products in use, this one would be driven by our SIP paging server, which would sit on the network and take those SIP calls and convert them into multicast. And the multicast can be picked up by all the different products that you can see here, our SIP strobes, both in the outdoor and indoor environment, the multicast speakers that you have in the hallways, as well as the standard SIP speakers that are in the classrooms and labs, as well as even the IP66 horns that could be in your gymnasium or outside the school. And then finally, you've got things like our help button that could be in hallways to be able to call security or the front office if, say, a fight goes on in the bathroom, or if there's, some kids scuffling in a hallway and one of your hall monitors runs over, and they can hit that help button and be able to get that emergency notification to that particular area. And you can also use one of our intercoms for access control to be able to control that for, say, your janitorial staff or anybody that could be trying to get through the facility. So with a Cyberdata solution, you can really design an entire paging capability, all for an entire school system. And with Vodia, you can leverage the extra functionality that you already get through Teams. So with Microsoft Teams, Vodia, and Cyberdata, you can really design an all-encompassing solution for your school or warehouse paging needs. So I really would like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. I've been Paul Tuttle. I'm our interop manager here at Cyberdata. I also do our cyber school that you can find on our YouTube channel. But if you have any questions or we didn't answer anything, we'll be taking questions after the end of today's webinar. But you can also reach out to us directly at sales@cyberdata.net. And even our support team. Our support team is available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 Pacific. You can hit them via online chat at support.cyberdata.net or just an old-fashioned phone call if you want to go that route.